Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Frontiers of Democracy, Stories from a New Generation of Leaders. My name is Chia Vang. I am UWM's Vice Chancellor for Community Empowerment and Institutional Inclusivity, and also a professor of history. I just want to say how excited I am to be here tonight. The panelists, the colleagues who will be sharing with us tonight. This is such a privilege for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So I'm really thankful that we have this opportunity to have this conversation on such an important topic, so impactful in the world today. We are at a very important moment in US history as well as world history. So really pleased to be able to be here and to support this event. I want to begin by thanking our staff from the University of Wisconsin, our Marcom team, our student affairs team, our community empowerment team. Everybody pulled together so that we can make this event possible in a very short period of time. So thank you, you know who you are. Thank you for allowing us to be able to host this event. I want to say this event is made possible only because of the Tommy Thompson Center for Public Leadership, its partnership with the McCain Institute, and the University of Wisconsin Institute for Civil Dialogue, Citizenship and Civil Dialogue. And Eric Giordano, thank you for reaching out to me and asking if we'd be interested in being considered to host this. Thank you also for being here tonight to support us. So the Thompson Center has done so many impactful events across the state. And I have benefited from attending so many of them, and I think that as Americans, one of the greatest gifts of being in a place like this is the ability to participate in civil dialogue, to participate in all kinds of conversations about these important issues of our time. So appreciate that. Just a little bit about the Thompson Center. Their goal is to foster and facilitate effective public leadership in Wisconsin and across the nation through research, teaching, public service, and events and other activities. So tonight's event is very, very important to the center and to all of us. That is because I'm usually pretty good at math. We have 6 days before the US election. It is an incredibly important moment for us. But with that said, I want to say that I just came back from a trip to Europe, and all of the conversations I had with colleagues in Germany and France, it is also a very important election to them. And there was a quote by a scholar in one of the panels that we participated in, and the quote is that when the US sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So that means that our elections are not just isolated within the US border. The impact is felt across the globe. So thank you for being here tonight. I also want to say when I had the chance to read the bios of our panelists tonight, I am so inspired. As a professor, I've taught for 18 years, and we often say that it is the elders that we look to for wisdom and inspiration. That is very true. In my culture, we revere our elders. But I also want to say every single day, I am inspired by young people. The kinds of risks they take, the kinds of leadership that they foster, they amaze me every single day. So tonight, that is all I'm hoping for, is to be even more inspired after listening to these young people. And with that, I want to introduce all of us to our moderator this evening. Scott Nemeth is the Assistant Director of Leadership Programs at the McCain Institute. Scott Nemeth, he serves as the Assistant Director for Leadership Programs at Arizona State. In his role, Nemeth leads the global leadership team and focuses on helping to prepare today's leaders to meet tomorrow's challenges. He also leads efforts to expand the Institute's leadership programs and manages both the McCain Global Leaders Advisory Council and the McCain Leadership Alumni Network. Prior to the McCain Institute, Nemeth served as the Legislative Strengthening Specialist at the International Republican Institute. He also served as a legislative assistant to U.S. Congressman David Valado. Scott, welcome.
Chia, thank you so much for your kind introduction. It's been a real pleasure for all of our folks that are with us here today to get to know you today, as well as Doug Savage. And we're really honored as the McCain Institute to have partnered with the Thompson Center and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. You've been tremendous hosts to us, and we are excited to bring the work of the McCain Institute and the work of our incredible global partners here to Milwaukee tonight. It's a really important time to be here in Wisconsin. I don't have to be the one to tell you all, it is a pivotal moment when it comes to democracy, civic engagement, and really the future of our own government at home in the United States, as well as abroad in many places around the world. But I gotta be honest with you, right now the world is in a very challenging state, especially when it comes to freedom, human rights, and democracy. As we gather here today, the world is at a point it hasn't been before in recent memory. A point where we now call into question what the global community will look like for future generations. We find ourselves in a time where there are unprecedented levels of turmoil, humanitarian crises on scales we have never seen before, distrust in government and democratic norms that are fueled by extremist ideologies and misinformation. And we have authoritarians in China and Russia and Iran whose influence has spread from regional to global and has undermined the free will of millions of people around the world, even here in the United States. And I know what I am saying to you is not new. You turn on the news and you see another tragedy. You get push notifications on your phone that share of yet another crisis. You scroll social media and you feel hopeless and tired because you are inundated with misinformation, conspiracy theories, and pretty much anything but positivity and hope. We are in a difficult spot, not just here at home, but around the world. The United Nations estimates almost 800 million people face food insecurity. The Geneva Academy is currently tracking 110 armed conflicts around the world. According to the World Bank, 2.4 billion women do not have the same rights as men in the eyes of the law. Freedom House, with their Freedom of the World report, noted that for the 18th consecutive year, freedom has declined. In the last year alone, 1/5 of the world saw their freedom decline at unprecedented levels. We know about Putin's unjust and criminal war in Ukraine. We know the unimaginable humanitarian crises and conflict in the Middle East. And we know of threats to allies like Taiwan coming from China. But there's so much more going on around the world in places that don't make it into the news cycle, like Sudan, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Georgia, Burma, and Afghanistan, all of which are facing unimaginable threats to democracy and human rights. This can all be exhausting and overwhelming, and the list could have gone on and on of what is happening in the world around us. But I do promise you this, there is hope, and there is a lot each of us can do to help turn the tide in this unprecedented time. You see, at the McCain Institute, we believe there is still a chance to push back on this dark wave of authoritarianism, and that the defense of democracy, freedom, and human rights is not hopeless. We carry on the late Senator John McCain's legacy and ethos of fighting for just causes and are working at home and abroad to ensure that future generations experience freedom and the right to determine their own path. I think once you meet and hear from our panelists in just a second, our intention is that you will walk away knowing there are some really great people risking a lot to try to make things better. And we all have the ability to make positive change in the world around us and do something about what scares us and keeps us uncertain about the future. Democracy comes in waves, and we truly believe that we can not only defend democracy, but advance it to be more equal, more free, and more just at home and abroad. We believe that there can be a new wave of democracy, one in which Ukraine is victorious and Putin embarrassed. Dictators in Africa who will fall to freedom fighters. Asia will be able to push back on Chinese influence, and trust and faith in America's electoral process is restored. And you don't have to look too far for this hope. In Guatemala, last year, young democracy activists prevailed and set forward a new, more free path for their country. In Kenya, peaceful protesters risked their lives to push the government to enact a more fair fiscal policy. India, the world's largest democracy, successfully conducted an election where 640 million people voted. And alongside those success stories, there are hundreds of thousands of young leaders around the world who have devoted their lives to defending and advancing democracy. At the McCain Institute, I have the great honor to be able to work on these issues alongside incredible young leaders from around the world. We work with these leaders every day to take on some of the challenges I just mentioned. They're here tonight to share their story, to share their work, to share the challenges they face. And they're here to share why it is important that we are all involved and that we all take part in the democratic process and do not take it for granted. They are here to share why we need to be engaged as the United States in the global community around us. And they are here to provide hope that the future may be better than the present. As you listen tonight and as you get the opportunity to ask your own questions, I urge you to think about their story, their work, and their purpose and how it might resonate with you, and to reflect on the role you play in the world around you. It is now my sincere pleasure to introduce to you the panelists who are truly standing on a day-to-day basis on the front lines of defending democracy and human rights. Our first panelist is Sunny Chang, a globally recognized democracy activist from Hong Kong who has risked his own personal freedom to push back against authoritarianism. Hajar Asa from Sudan is pushing back against civil war, famine, and genocide in the hope of having a free and democratic Sudan. Dr. Maria Levchenko from Ukraine is a global expert in peace and reconciliation who has been forced to leave her home due to Putin's war and is currently pushing back just to ensure that her home country has the right to exist. And finally, we have Tukudza Gadzore from Zimbabwe, who has faced imprisonment and torture to become the country's youngest member of parliament and counter decades of dictator rule. So please join me in welcoming this incredible panel. So first, I'd like to ask Sunny a little bit about your background and Hong Kong and the work that you've done there and now in exile here in the United States.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's my first time in Wisconsin. I live here in DC for a while. Rarely travel beyond DC. So really great to be here to witness how this country is and operates. So yeah, I was born and raised in Hong Kong. And then Hong Kong, as you may know, is a very international financial city, very developed. We were a British colony, so we had a lot of political institution, judicial institution that try to differentiate us from our counterparts in mainland China. So we have a very different common law system following the British common law. And then we cherish about the freedom of individual, and we talk a lot regarding political freedom. So for years or even decades, we try to live our own life and try to protect the autonomy of Hong Kong even after the handover, after the British handover Hong Kong back to China in 1997. So I was born in 1996, and then when I was small, I was told that Hong Kong could have the freedom to criticize the Chinese Communist Party. And that is kind of one of the most vital things which we can do in Hong Kong, but not in any mainland Chinese city in China. I went to rallies and protests with my parents since I was like 6 or 7. And then I cherished about our freedom. And then, however, the crackdown intensified. And especially after the rise of the current Chinese leader, Xi Jinping, in 2012, everything has changed really rapidly. He centralized his own power. As you may know, he abolished the term limit of being the Chinese president, and currently this is his third term to become the Chinese leader, and he is going to seek for the 4th term for sure. So I was still an activist because I witnessed what happened in Hong Kong. I saw that Xi Jinping trying to diminish the political autonomy in Hong Kong. Hong Kong people were promised that we could have the privilege and right to elect our own city leader. This is promised by the Chinese leader at that period of time to the British, so that the British was willing to hand over Hong Kong back to China. However, the Xi Jinping broke the promise. The universal suffrage never happened in Hong Kong. So we could not elect our leader, and we Hong Kong people really hate our destiny could not be controlled by our own hand. So even I was small in high school, I already organized a lot of class boycotts and tried to mobilize students across the college and university, 100,000 of them, to fight for the democracy of Hong Kong. So in 2019, that was my first time in DC because I was doing international advocacy. I testified before the US Congress, tried to talk to bipartisan lawmakers about what happened in Hong Kong and why it is important to fight for democracy for Hong Kong people against China. And right now, however, I'm now here in exile seeking asylum because after my activism, the Hong Kong government and Beijing tried to arrest many friends of mine, including me, so I'm now wanted by the government. I fled the country in 2020 and now still doing a lot of work trying to promote the democracy and trying to protect the value that I cherish.
Thank you, Sunny. Hajar, you come from Sudan, which right now is facing genocide and famine on historical scales. Can you talk about growing up in Sudan and a little bit about your work in activism?
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be with you. So yeah, I come from Sudan, but my parents originally come from Darfur. To those who do not know where Darfur is, it's in the west region of Sudan. It's a region that has always been discriminated, has always been treated as if it's not a part of the country, sadly. Growing up in Khartoum did not make me have only the feeling that I can do better, but also I wanted to help. So having that kind of, not privilege, but also the chance to make a change and to be able to be that kind of voice did kind of put me in the place that I'm at right now. And to put it back in place again, Sudan is currently going through a genocide, which sadly started 2 years ago, so far on the clock right now, because of a fight between two dictators who are fighting over power. They go on media, they go on stages, they go on TV talking about how much they care about community, how much they care about the country, but that's not the case, 100% not. One of those parties, RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, is sadly being supported by UAE and Russia. And the Sudan Armed Forces, who are not getting that much of support, but both of them are actually committing a lot of human rights violations towards almost everyone in the country. Thousands and millions of people were forced to flee the country. They had to leave seeking refuge, going to Uganda, going to Kampala, South Sudan, you name it. But all of that is still not helping because even when they go outside, they're still being treated as like an outsider, you know, because of all the relations that are happening. And of course, pretty much happens a lot that all in African countries, dictators are kind of united, right? So it goes within them, like they have their own kind of tactics, they have their own kind of techniques. So you never know. You as a citizen, when you go, you're just going there seeking refuge, but you never know what's gonna happen. You're still gonna be treated as bad as you were in your own country. So this is basically what's happening in Sudan right now, super sad. And I'm sad for the fact that I do worry about a lot of people, even my own family is still back in Sudan, and I'm not able to do that. So this is kind of the things that make me wonder every single day about why are we here yet? Why are we in this situation as a continent? While as in seeing Africa, seeing, for example, the EU, as in European Union, they help each other. But then why, when it comes to Africa, they treat each other as strangers? So this is what I wanted to say on that one.
Thank you. Maria, you and I met over Zoom about 2 days after you had evacuated from Ukraine at the start of the full-scale invasion. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your experiences the last couple of years and also your work around the world focusing on peace building.
Thank you, Scott. And I can also share that I'm privileged and lucky, as my colleagues said, to be here today and talk a little bit about our experiences and our stories. And I also wanted to start saying that the war in Ukraine has been going on not for just 2 or 3 years, it has been going on for the last 10 years. And we do prefer not to call it Ukraine-Russia war, but Russian aggression against Ukraine, because we did not start it. And how it feels, I was telling yesterday at the panel, it really feels like a neighbor comes to your home, opens the door, rapes your children, kills your wife, and says that you cannot speak your language, you cannot have your culture, and this is how it's going to be from this day on. So this is how it feels to be in Ukraine and have Russia as your neighbor. I have been working in the civil society field since 2014. Before that, I was just teaching at the university, I was very passionate about international relations. But in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, that was a point where I realized I want to do something more. I want to give back to the country. And that's when I saw a large number of internally displaced persons coming to my city. And I realized, if not me, then who? So this is where I found myself in the field of peace building, which is usually on the last topic of any type of the agenda. We talk about weapons, we talk about the nuclear weapons, but we rarely talk about peace and the ways how to reach it using the dialogue and peaceful means. But I have been working a lot in a different context, including Uganda, Ethiopia, Chad, and Ukraine. And I do see that there is a hope, and I do see there is a need for peaceful ways to solve the conflict. And in 2022, I woke up like many other of my compatriots, citizens of Kiev, from the sounds of rocket explosion. And at first it was really hard to even understand what was happening around us. You cannot believe it. It feels surreal. You don't understand how in the century where we have ChatGPT and AI, and we can fly from Frankfurt to Chicago in just 9 hours, a country next to you is going to use missiles to attack you and kill the people that you know and you love. So I had to evacuate together with my son, and I found myself in Germany, where I'm based at this moment of time. But I do keep working on the peace building, and I do keep traveling to Ukraine almost every month, working with my people. So I'll leave it at that for this moment.
Thank you. Takudzwa, you faced insurmountable challenges over the years to focus on democracy and become elected as the youngest member of parliament. Can you share a little bit about the history of Zimbabwe as it relates to dictatorial rule and the work that you're doing?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. To begin with, I think you might know that Zimbabwe had one leader, who is Robert Gabriel Mugabe. And in 2017, that is when a military coup happened. And people thought that this was going to be a new dispensation, but it turned out to become a new desperation. People had hope that things were going to change, but they didn't. Why? I suppose it's because the change that happened came not from the people, but the military intervened as a force of power and as an institution to facilitate the route that the dictator who is now sitting at the realms of the power to start ruling the country. What we witness in Zimbabwe is socio-economic and political turbulence. What we witness in Zimbabwe is people trying to speak out, but they get arrested. I myself am a victim of the first-degree misgovernance that has happened in my country. But the journey that I have traversed as a student activist has made me realize that there is more to do. I served as president of the Student Representative Council at Great Zimbabwe University. Beyond that, I decided to campaign and also be elected as the president of the Zimbabwe National Students Movement, which is the biggest students movement fighting to create an inclusive and democratic Zimbabwe where student concerns are heard, academic freedoms upheld and promoted, but with students as integral stakeholders in each and every decision-making process. That happened. But with me fighting on the front line as president, I saw unjust arrest coming, torture and abduction coming. If I'm to count now, I've been arrested 13 times, but I have been charged only 5 times. I have 5 court cases which are pending before the courts of law. I faced pre-trial detention for over months and months in the dungeons of terror which are located right in Zimbabwe. For some of you who know, Zimbabwe is located in Africa. Zimbabwe is located in the southern part or the global south, where it is hard for people to access a standard of living in which they can participate, in which they can take care of families, and in which they can afford enough education. But with that history, I decided to even go beyond from students' activism to move to the civil society. I've worked with institutions like Accountability Lab, which is a global institution working to make sure that governance work. I've worked with Trust Africa, which focuses on 3 things particularly. Number 1, it's equitable development. Number 2, democratic governance. And lastly, African philanthropy. Having participated in civil society, I realized this is time that I could move to politics. But not only that, I had hopes and aspirations for me to study abroad, but I could not. Why? Because my passport had been taken in year 2020. My passport was just released early 2024. So this means I had 4 years with no passport. Even after attaining any opportunity that you might think of abroad, I could not travel. Even after attaining scholarships that I would have applied for, I could not travel. The only thing that was standing for me as an option is to stand up and fight for democracy to thrive. But I don't think this was necessitated particularly because I had no passport, but because of the hope that I have for the coming generation to live in a free society, but also the how I value the contributions which were made by those who fought for the liberation of the country, Zimbabwe itself, but also importantly a belief that the yet to be born ought to live in a free society, a society which is free from socio-economic and political turbulence, a society in which you can echo your voice of reason and be tolerated, regardless of your difference, regardless of how society can be stratified. We ought to rise up and stand up, and this is what identifies me as a devoted academic freedom fighter, as a committed human rights defender, and importantly, as a policymaker with my job enshrined particularly in the Zimbabwean Constitution, Section 119, which gives me 3 roles. That is to play the representative function, the oversight function, and the legislative function. This is who I am now after having campaigned to become the youngest member of parliament in Zimbabwe. And I think using that as a vehicle to pioneer change, I will try as much to have pro-democratic policies, but importantly, as Vice Chairperson of the Parliamentary Youth Caucus, which is a vehicle that was established in the year 2012 to curb political animosity and zealotry within Zimbabwe, where we need to remove our political jackets to deal with pro-youth issues, regardless of each political party that you're coming from, regardless of the side of the aisle that you belong to. What we need to do is to pioneer pro-youth issues in the end of the day. So I believe that as the Vice Chairperson, this is also a platform for me to continue, and I think that identifies the history of Zimbabwe and my identity, as you've asked. Thank you.
I think I can speak for the audience that after our first arrest, we might just give up. And after being tortured, we would definitely give up.
Yes.
Why is it so important for you to continue this fight and continue to put yourself in harm's way?
History is the best answer to the question you just asked. I believe that there is no struggle without bruises. I believe that there is no way that you can attain freedom without paying for it. But importantly, I also believe that a struggle without pain is a picnic. So the more you fight on the front line of democracy, the more you stand to say enough is enough. It defines you being human. You can't be human and not be willing to speak out. You can't be human and not enjoy the freedoms that you're supposed to enjoy. And I think this fuels my zeal and determination for me to continue fighting on, regardless of these stories of arrests, torture, abduction. Just last year, November, I was abducted and tortured with men carrying AK-47 guns. I was saved only because I went on a Facebook Live. I took a 7-second video, and during the moments of torture, that's when the perpetrators were told and informed that you're already trending, and they had to leave me. But when they left me after using iron bars, after using electric tasers, and after using all kinds of instruments that they used, I had a blackout. But I still woke up onto that and told the people that we need to fight on, because we need to appear more as victors and not victims in this struggle. And that's the only way we can appeal to more people for them to join, because it's a reasonable cause. It's not illegal for us to fight. It's not illegal for us to demand that we want a free society. We want the Constitution to be a living document and not just a paper that influences dictators and that can be abused when people want to abuse it. So this is what fuels my zeal and determination.
Hajar, you shared with me earlier that your family doesn't necessarily love your activism because it puts a big target on their back. Why is it so important for you to continue to advocate for freedom, human rights, and democracy in Sudan?
They don't like it, but I do it for them. And I do it for the community. I do it for the other ones, like back home, and all the children that are not able to go to school, or the women that are being raped right now. Like in Sudan, right now, within the war, the number of women who actually committed suicide in the fear of being raped, over 300 women. This is only in one state. I do it for them. Because if we're all gonna give up, then who's gonna do it? And I think pretty much resonates to what my colleague here said. If it's not me, then who, right? And I think just thinking of it every single day, growing up with the thought of, yes, I can go to sleep, I can read, I can, let's say, have a normal life, but they can't. Why? Why did they have to go through this? Like waking up to the sounds of like bombing, just out of the blue, one day out of the night. If I'm able to make this change, if I'm able to advocate, I think this is what really gives me the power to speak up for them, to help. And I think my family would still, like every single day, definitely keep on telling me that they don't like it because they think of me as well, but I also think of them. And I think the power of, like, I see it also that democracy is not only the vote, right, today. Democracy is bigger than that. It's about the vision that you have in your eye that can make a change in the whole world, not only just in a specific community. So we're not doing it only for one person. We're doing it for many generations yet to come.
Thank you. Sunny, you were born into a free, democratic Hong Kong. And in your lifetime, which you're really, really young, but in just your lifetime, it's completely shifted. What are some of the warning signs that folks should know about when it comes to authoritarians gaining power?
That's a very great question. I mean, so with hindsight, I would argue that when you try to do trade at the expense of human rights and democracy, and that's a very bad sign. And worst thing happened. Back to 1989, actually, Beijing government already waged a massacre to kill so many Chinese students peacefully protesting at Tiananmen Square. So that was the famous Tiananmen massacre in 1989. So at that period of time, the US was mad, the EU was mad, a lot of sanction, weapon embargo happened against China. But just several years, they feel like, well, but China is a big market there, right? We have to continue the market. They lift the sanction, they try to be friends with China, they invite China to join the World Trade Organization, try to normalize everything. I think that's a very bad sign. Because when you try to, for the sake of interest, and then you sacrifice this kind of like very basic human values, and this is no good to the human being. And secondly, I would also argue that in 2014, when after the rise of Xi Jinping, when he tried to deprive the political rights of Hong Kong people, because Hong Kong people was once told that you are able to elect your own city leader, but they broke the promise. I think that is also a very bad sign. And especially lastly, I would say when Xi Jinping tried to abolish his term limit at mansion and tried to be a very lifelong dictator, everlastingly trying to govern China, that's a bad sign. And however, the world unfortunately didn't see it this way. And that's why we face a lot of consequences that really haunt us till nowadays.
Sunny, you are now here in exile in the United States seeking asylum. Why did you take so much great personal risk to be such a vocal voice at such a young age?
I second with the previous speakers about how important democracy is. And we are not doing that just for myself, just for family, but we are doing that for the whole society and mankind. I would also argue that it's really important for me because even though I'm young, but I feel like I cannot tolerate some people that try to determine the destiny of others by themselves. This is not right, right? We have to control our own destiny. We have to decide our own future. And this is a very important human rights thing. I mean, as history has proven, human beings, I think, deserve the right to live freely, to enjoy, to speak freely. And this kind of things are not something bestowed by a king, by a queen, by a dictator. This is something very intrinsic that was born with a human. So I think it's really important for me to stand with this value and try to fight with my community, especially when I see, even though I'm young, but I saw many people still younger than me, like 15 years old. They were arrested by Hong Kong police, and some of them were raped by the Hong Kong police, and they are not even an adult. So when you see so much sacrifice in Hong Kong, can you really just give up your own people? No. My answer is no. So I think we have to fight for democracy till the day we see the liberation.
Let's say you hopped on a flight to Hong Kong tomorrow. What would happen to you when you landed?
I have several cases, perhaps just like many people here, and then I'm wanted by the government. So if tomorrow I go back to Hong Kong, I face perhaps the maximum life sentence. And then many friends of mine are already being in prison for more than 3 to 4 years, and they are going to face perhaps more than 10 years or even life sentence. So this really tells you how worse the situation is right now in Hong Kong. So I really urge all of you to support and stand with the democracy across the world.
Thank you. Maria, Ukraine is not just fighting to be a sovereign state, they're fighting to be a democracy. We're in a place in the global community where democracy is not necessarily favorable. People are questioning democracy. And for a long time, we thought that it was the greatest, best form of government. We still believe that it is for the most part. But why do Ukrainians care so much about having the right to choose their leaders and the right to choose their own destiny?
Yeah, that's a very important question actually to reflect on. Democracy for us, I think it's working. Democracy for us, it's the ability to make a choice. It's the ability to be who we are, to have our own identities, and to be able to choose what we want to go, how we want to live. And for many Ukrainians right now, this war with Russia is it's very exhausting. I'll be very honest. The people that I work with, I see a lot of trauma. I see a lot of PTSD, and every time I travel to Ukraine, I'm traumatized myself. And we had a case not long time ago, in the beginning of September, when Russia has sent the missiles in the western part of Ukraine, which is usually much more protected. It's very far away because Ukraine is a big country. And that rocket missile that they sent on that day killed a family of 4 people. It killed a wife and 3 daughters of one man. And he survived only because he came back to his apartment to grab a bottle of water for them. And the whole family died. So the question is, it's a matter of survival, right? It's about the life. Why do one country has an opportunity and is being allowed to do something so horrific that hurts and kills the other people? And we really want to have this ability to tell them to stop and to pay us back.
Takudzwa, for your whole life, you've experienced dictatorship. And obviously, you're fighting for democracy, but what is your pitch to people on why democracy matters and why democracy is important?
Thank you for that question. I think democracy is essential because it is the oxygen to the desirable end. Democracy gives people a platform to air their concerns and shape, but not only to shape, but to design the future that they want. But beyond the future, it's about the present moment. So once people are given that platform, then people can air their concerns. So I believe that we can never ignore the importance of democracy. A person with no democracy is equally as a dead person. So it is by that same reason that I believe that people should care about democracy. I believe that if anyone else is not able to express themselves, then they are not a living being, because expression is a critical component for you to be human. And it comes with you airing what you believe in, be it politically, socially, economically, or in any other ways that you might think about.
Thank you. Hajer, I think it's no secret that globally young people are marginalized, and you all are a testament that we shouldn't be doing that young people really can play an incredible role in the global community. Why should the global community pay attention to young people and listen to what they have to say.
Very much to get a fresh insight on the facts, the things that are happening. Because in many African countries, I'm going to speak of that perspective, that we grew up, we just find dictators who've been ruling the country for over 30 years. Sudan, Bashir was ruling the country for over 30 years. In Uganda right now, Museveni is almost 70 years old, and he still like want to change the whole system in the country just so he can be actually qualified. If not, he will give it to his son. So when we think of this, we need more of a fresh perspective of younger generations that actually can give a different thought to that. And with the new generations that are working on a lot of initiatives, for example, that are helpful, with new initiatives, with new organizations, new thoughts that are bringing a lot, working on democracy, working on supporting refugees, working on supporting children, working on supporting women. These are the kind of thoughts that need also new kind of new support from international community, from everyone who's willing to help. So I think bringing really the ideas and putting younger generations into involving them more in politics, involving them more into decision making, because if we are thinking of it in the context of democracy, we don't only gonna get democracy from one age. We need different ages. One, I think, when we give the opportunity to younger generations, we're already kind of having an insight, having a bright light, kind of into stepping into a brighter future.
Sunny, a lot of what happened in Hong Kong in terms of protests was led by young people. Can you kind of give us a little behind the scenes of how young people work together to push back against a very strong authoritarian ruler in Xi Jinping?
Sure. I would say, first of all, Hong Kong, for years and for decades, in the Hong Kong social movement history, all the major social movements were led by young people, young college students, or even high school kids. The reason for that is because we have a very strong tradition and foundation to support young people to become the voice. I mean, we used to have a very a strong, robust foundation to support. For example, we have great student unions. They are a separate legal entity, and we have our own funding. And then that supports the young people to speak up their mind and try to involve in social issues. Because in Hong Kong, I believe actually all over the world, right? When people talk about, well, young people should be the next generation, they are the next generation, so we should, try to involve them and respect them. But however, speaking of policy support, speaking of how the elderly perceive young people, sometimes it's not this case, right? So you have to act like one when we talk about we are the next generation. You have to act like one. So we have to uphold the obligation and duty to fight for democracy, and this is the common belief in Hong Kong. If we don't do that, then who, right? Especially if we have less burden. For example, we don't have to look after a family yet. We don't have to pay tax, perhaps. But this kind of like less burden can allow us, enable us, empower us to fight for democracy. And I think this really allows us to stand up against Xi Jinping. And especially we witness what happened in our society. We just feel like young people should have the obligation. And this is the history and the foundation of our own society.
Thank you. So in the US, very much on the ballot next week is about how big a role the United States plays in the global community. Takudzwa, why should people here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or in Florida, or South Carolina, or anywhere else in the country care about what happens in Zimbabwe?
Thank you so much for an important question, which I think it's unfortunate that the world is designed in such a way that puts us as people to be in these boundaries. But beyond it all is humanity. So I believe that with the coming election, what people should look at is how there is crisis somewhere and it's still affecting human beings. If you look at it from a point of interest, geopolitics in global politics has made the world to look east, to look west, to look south. But importantly, I believe that the people who are here should also have a care for the crisis that is happening in Zimbabwe. We have so many Zimbabweans who are here, but not only Zimbabweans. We have people from Sudan, people from Hong Kong, people who are coming here. They are living those crisis zones to come here. So only if we are to support that democracy thrives in places where they are coming from, that is when we can rescue and make sure that a world becomes a safe place for everyone. And I think this is more the bigger strategy. I think it's Sun Tzu who says strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise we make before defeat. And I think the biggest strategy that we can ever have as people look to the coming election is to vote for humanity, is to think about how we need a world that is safe for everyone. And I think that should guide more around what you are going to vote for and how you are going to see the future and, importantly, the present. Because still, what is happening elsewhere is still going to have an impact in what's happening here.
2.5 years ago, you really couldn't walk down the street without seeing a Ukrainian flag in the United States, whether it was here in Milwaukee or in Washington, D.C., or anywhere else. During this election, Ukraine has come up quite a bit, and it's definitely something that is a hot topic here in the United States about how much aid, militarily, foreign aid, goes to Ukraine. Why should Americans continue to support Ukrainian efforts?
First of all, we are super grateful for the United States for supporting us. This has been incredibly great for us, and without support, we would not be where we are right now. I would tell you for sure that Ukraine will be conquered by Russia at this moment of time, if not for United States support. I think it's important to keep Ukrainian agenda, and I understand how it can be used for the polarizing discussions and saying, well, you have issues in our own country, why do we have to spend more money on some other country which is so far away? But I wanted to tell you, war is much closer than you can think about it. And uncertainty that Russia creates, the example that Russia sends into the world, saying, you know, these autocracies, they work perfectly together. All these dictators, they are sticking together like a bodies, like a team. Russia, Iran, North Korea, they all work perfectly fine. When we ask for support, we have to wait for 2 years to get long-range missiles. So supporting Ukraine is just not supporting a country which is far away from you. It's supporting a cause of democracy. It's showing the world how it should be done, because autocracy is like a virus. It spreads super fast. And believe it, in the blink of the eye, you'll see how it can spread in your country as well. That's why I feel like it's really important.
In my remarks, I talked a little bit about how it's easy to feel hopeless right now. But you all are living examples that it doesn't have to be hopeless, that you can do something about it. But I think part of that hopeless feeling is, what do I do? How do I get involved? How do I make a difference? So Hajar, what is your advice to folks who want to take a step, get involved in the democratic process, and fight for a cause?
Very much think about others before yourself. I think once you're in that situation, once you're in the field of putting others first, you're already being hopeful, right? And I think, as I think has been said before, that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. That's the kind of hope that we always keep. There's no matter what, no matter how many dictators we're dealing with, there's always an end for them. And if we can't do it now, it will always happen. It might take ages, it might take years. It might not even be like any of us, of my colleagues here, like being able to do it. It might not be anyone here in the room. But as long as we are working all together, as long as we are aiming at that, and we are kind of like transferring it like over and over to many generations, I think we're already making the change, and we're being hopeful enough. And we need to believe in ourselves as well. We need to remember that democracy is not always about voting. Democracy is bigger than that. And everybody has the right to be free. Everybody has the right to wake up every day in the morning and feel happy and feel safe and feel like they have the right to express themselves freely without having the fear of being silenced in many ways, in whatever ways you can ever think of. So I think that's the only message that I have for hope. And yeah, democracy will win, definitely.
Sunny, you were the architect of a democratic movement. What advice do you have to folks?
Well, I mean, I believe in human history, and I believe in the how civilization has evolved till now, right? So there are some ups and downs in human history, but I also believe that democracy ultimately will win. So this is my really strong belief. Look into human history, how far we have come, right? I mean, in general, or the biggest direction, I think we are still moving forward, and we keep improving. We try to bring in a better society. I think this is how civilization works. So we should be proud of what we have already done and achieved. Of course, there are some derail, there are ups and downs, but we should have the courage to overcome that. I think this is how our great ancestor handled the problem, right? I mean, different era, different decades, different century has their own problem. But I still very believe that we can try to overcome all this kind of difficulties if we do this all together. Because if we are divided, we fall. If we were united, stand as one, I believe we can try to win all this kind of up and down, and then try to fight for democracy and try to fight for all human mankind to become a better society. And this is really my belief.
Thank you. Maria, I think of one word when I think of you, and that's resilient. And I want to ask you, why should we be hopeful right now in the face of so many challenges?
I wanted to say because we have no other choice. That's why we have to be resilient, and that's why we should be very hopeful. I really wanted to end up on a little bit more optimistic note than yesterday, because I feel like I have been talking a lot about, uncertainty and dictators. I think something that really helps all of us and all leaders throughout the world is having a good sense of humor and remembering that something that we are doing right now is we do for the future generations. And just a small story, anecdote, I was with my mother, we were driving in Ukraine. It was a time when there was an air alert, there was attack by the Russians, that we could see the rocket flying above us, and I was super scared. I was thinking, why am I doing that? I could be somewhere in the shelter. And I tell my mom, I'm scared. What are we supposed to do? There's a rocket flying over us. And she looked at me and she said, well, if you see the rocket in the road, just don't drive into it, just drive around. And that's, that sense of humor that she has coming from her generation, living in the Soviet Union, witnessing so much stuff, and being able to move forward is something that I keep for myself and I really want to share with the others.
Thank you so much. And really, thank you to each of you who are doing incredible work and really, I think, give us hope, right? You guys each represent hope all around the world. And so you all traveled a really long way to get here. And I think on behalf of the audience, really appreciate you. At this time, I want to go ahead and open it up to the audience for any questions that you might have for the panelists.
I did want to ask, and this one goes out to each and every one of you, but making it here right now just to UWM is a huge step, so I congratulate all of you guys for that. But my question was, what are you guys' next steps? Like after this, you guys are, I know you guys have been all over the place. What was it, like Madison before? So these are like, you guys are reaching out, you're spreading your message everywhere. But like politically speaking, what are you guys' next steps and what do you intend to go from after this?
Thank you. I think I'll start. What's my next step? So the attainment of democracy is more like we are climbing a staircase. And what influences the next step is not particularly how you may know it or how you might think about it. It's more about the power you carry from the past. And what influences the next step that I'm going to take is certainly the same vigor, the same energy that I have been with from since when I was a students' movement, from since now when I'm a human rights defender and a policymaker. It's still raising the voice. It's still participating in every democratic process, be it elections. It's still getting to the streets when it comes to protesting. Because politics will always evolve around those two concepts of conflict and cooperation. But when conflict comes, my identity does not change. And when cooperation comes, my identity will not change. So that particularly is my next step, is being me is maintaining the same color, is maintaining the same identity that I have told you, and just remodeling my mind to ask myself, how exactly can I contribute to something that is evolving or something that erupts? And I believe that as young people, this is only but our responsibility. You may know that the main function of a thermometer is to measure temperature, or of a thermostat is to determine temperature. But I believe that young people are the political thermostats for each and every revolution. So they determine the political temperature and they don't measure it. So I believe that as a young person, I'm at the center to state, define, redefine, and respond to the national question. Thank you.
I mean, I can be super brief. I think for all of us, this is not the destination, this is the road and the journey that we are taking. So it doesn't matter where we're going to end up next week. I know the colleagues have travels have come in, the same for me. We're still going to work on something that is really important for us and we are passionate about. So this is where I find myself at this moment.
I think I also kind of very much found myself always that I was angry most of the time for everything. Whenever I hear the news of still every single day of what's happening in my home and thinking of people back there. But now I'm coming to realize, and I think I'm going to keep this thought, that the fight will definitely continue on without anger, but of course rather with actions. So I think continuing on actions and advocating more and also kind of reflecting on how important democracy is and how important talking about Sudan is, about other regions that are being forgotten is. This is the first step to start on, and also like going back home one day and hoping for the change to happen.
And for me, I think two things, right? First of all, enrich yourself. I think it's very important to keep enriching yourself, no matter what you do, because so whenever you are busy, even though you are very busy, I mean, you have to still trying to explore some new things and try to learn some new things. I think it's really important in order to continue to advocate for your own cause, and also try to frame your own cause in order to disseminate story to other people. So keep enriching yourself, I think is important. And secondly, I would say is find more allies. This will be definitely my next move. As mentioned, many autocracy, many dictators are united, and we have to find more allies. Democracy should be united too. So there should be no isolationism. I mean, the world is interconnected, and we need more allies to stand with us and fight together so we can be more powerful, and one day we can claim victories. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all of your contributions and for being here and for educating us. So you're young people. But Sunny, you talked about your experience as a child, kind of, having your parents model what being an engaged citizen looks like. And Maria, you have a son who's observing you every day and what you're doing. And so I'm wondering, what do you hope to model to young people under you? Even though you're young yourselves, like what do you hope to model to the 7-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, the 10-year-olds? Because it's going to be a multi-generational effort, and it's never ending to the work towards maintaining, sustaining, evolving, and growing democracies across the world and in your own countries.
I will tell them, don't take it for granted, everything. Everything you see in the society, every welfare, everything, you feel like you like it, and then don't take it for granted, right? Because most of the things are really built by the people that are before you. And then, so in order to ensure that you can also keep the same thing, maintain the same thing, and also ensure the next generation can have the same thing that you love, I think it's really important that you have to fight for it. You have to fight for it. So I will, I don't have children yet, but if I have one, I will tell them, don't take it for granted. No matter your personal freedom, everything you care about, so you have to do something for that. I think it's really my biggest message for that. yeah, don't get complacent. Yeah.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. My son is 13 years old. He's in a teenager age right now. It's very complicated at some points, as you can imagine. Yeah, I think what I model for him, and he sometimes is super not happy that I'm not home. He really wants his mom to be home, and he doesn't like when I travel far away. But what I model for him is the sacrifices that we have to make, unfortunately, for the line of the work that we are doing, but also empathy that we are all having, because I would not do this work if I did not feel what I feel for the other people, compassion and love and the support that I want to give them. So this is something I want to cultivate in him and in the younger generation in this moment.
I think very much that they should keep the fight. That is the model that I would like for my sister as well to see. I mean, I feel like I was very sad seeing her growing up only in pictures. Now she's 17 years old. And I can imagine only the feeling that she feels whenever she sees like the things that she grew up like having random people coming knocking on our door, asking like about my name, asking about my family, and she pretty much knew what was happening because my dad was like, no, we need to explain to her what was going on. At that certain moment, I thought like probably he was just trying to tell her so she would be like, you know, completely away from politics. But no, he was telling her so she can be aware of it, so she can know like if she's gonna take the same road, this is how it's gonna happen. So I want to model for her that we're gonna stumble, we're gonna fall, we're gonna have fear, but we can also use this fear to be the fuel that will push us forward. That's pretty much what I would like.
Thank you. I think that this struggle that we fight is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you raise that from a generational perspective. And with us handing over the baton to the next generation, I believe it's not only for them to maintain the same pace, but it's more around them understanding the pitfalls, the glitches that we have made ourselves. So importantly, they need to think more about what we are doing wrong. But they also need to know themselves and to know the enemy. It's Sun Tzu who says, if you know yourself and you know the enemy, you will not be afraid when you face anything. If you know yourself and you know the enemy, you will conquer in 100 battles. But if you know yourself and neither the enemy, you will succumb in every battle. So it's important that they understand the enemy, and the enemy changes in every society. Sometimes we are fighting for economic emancipation. Sometimes we are fighting because the space politically is shrinking. Sometimes we are fighting even when economic turbulence has been solved, but we have societal problems, which I think this coming election in the United States has critical issues that are going to convince each and every one of you to say we are going to the ballot. And I believe that if the coming generation manages to know those particular issues contextually and understand what they want in the end of the day, that's exactly what they should attain. So it's about knowing their ideological disposition. It's Thomas Sangara who says a soldier without an ideological disposition is a potential criminal. So they ought to know what they are fighting for. Are they fighting for free education? Are they fighting for democracy to thrive? Are they fighting for human rights violations to end? So they ought to know exactly their particular ideological persuasion. And it comes through from reading. It comes through, importantly, from covering the information gap. Because I think dictators in this world, they thrive more because we have not covered the information gap. The lack of exposure by the oppressed sector of society is what they benefit from. But once we make sure that the coming generation understands that it is possible that you can speak your mind and not be arrested, you can stand up and vote without being tortured, you can cast the ballot, you can share your vision without being judged, you can wear what you want, you can speak what you want, you can express yourself, then they're going to fight for it. So that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be quick. First of all, the privilege is all ours. You said it's thank you all. Really how quickly things can devolve in Hong Kong. I'll just remember that, like what it was. The two quick questions, one for Ukraine. Finland faced what you did 80 years ago against Russia, and they joined NATO, and I'm wondering how that makes you feel, and if you feel that's a connection. And then, just because I don't know, which nation in Africa would be looked at as kind of the best beacon of democracy that exists that maybe you look to in that region? And I don't know the answer, which is why I ask. So thank you.
Question of NATO. It's a big one, huh? We are very hopeful to be part of it, but we were told since the country is in the active state of the war, we are not allowed. And for many Ukrainians, it feels very strange because when, if not now, when we desperately need support and we desperately need unity. But at this moment of time, my President Zelensky, he's just working on how to move it forward and how to be able to push for NATO. So unfortunately, at this moment of time, it's just a hope for us. Yeah.
Add a little bit on the context of Africa. The country that's being looked at as the beacon of democracy is Ghana. But it also, I find it very, very funny because the only reason it's being looked at as a beacon of democracy because the president is only allowed to be a president for 8 years. So this is the fun fact. For them, that's only, when it comes to dictators, that's the only way how democracy functions. So, yeah. And the only reason why they're being looked at also because I would have to admit, the president of Ghana is very much of a qualified president, I have to admit. He's the one who's getting a lot of opportunities to speak out. And when he's going out, he's representing the continent in the most perfect way. But sometimes I would really hope that if he would use all of this knowledge to represent the continent and speak of the conflicts that are also happening, but that's not happening. So I think it's going to start to change when they realize that democracy isn't only about a president having the chance to only be voted for twice. Yeah. What do you think about
that? Thank you. I think I do concur with what she has said. I also would think that, you see, it's more like a club of dictators. So sometimes you want to think of who has the less dictatorial tendencies, and you celebrate that as democracy. But to me, I think there is still more to do. And with that, I would have answered.
Seen as also kind of hope right now by having the youngest president, but we still don't know. It's always been the case in Africa that we don't know really what's happening. Yeah.
We have a question here. Scott, let me know when we're on our last one, okay?
Hi there, my name is John Ward. I'm a community volunteer that lives 3 blocks from this building and voted right across the street a couple days ago. And that definitely is a privilege that I think we take for granted. And it's a very humbling experience to have you all here. I'm also a retired U.S. diplomat, so served in our U.S. embassies, not in any of your countries. So I'm retired. I cannot speak for the United States, but speaking as a former U.S. government official, I want to thank you for your courage and for being here. I know it's very hard to be away from home. And Scott, thank you for what the McCain Institute does, and I think a lot of us know what Senator McCain stood for, and very humbling. So on occasion, on a part-time basis, I get to escort our international visitor leadership visitors that come from all over the world. And what's really amazing is how they form as a group. And I know you don't have as much time together, but you've had some time together now. So my question is, what have you learned from each other in your time in the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I learned a lot from my cohorts and friends and colleagues about the situation of the global democracy. And I think this is also why it is so essential for us to be here, because we see that different dictators and leaders, they work together So like for me, like I saw, oh, Xi Jinping, China is now actually expanding and building a lot of relations in Africa, in Middle East. They're trying to exporting the China model to other dictators. For example, the digital surveillance. They try to exporting this kind of like model to other dictators to ensure that other dictators can also use the China model to monitor their citizen, to keep check on what happened there, and then in response to the U.S. or the Western world democracy. And this is very alarming because I mean, the world is huge. I have never been, for example, Latin America. I've never been Africa. But from what I heard, what I have from my cohort, and I understand very much right now, so why we should be here and why the US should, and other Western country should play a bigger role. Because if you don't, and then China can, or Russia or North Korean, they can do whatever they want and trying to projecting more influence, malicious influence across the world. And democracy will be in severe danger. So I think this is a very critical moment for us to be together. So I really enjoy the conversation with you all, and then I learn a lot, and I hope that we can use this kind of like lesson from each other, and then try to improve our work, improve our advocacy, and show that we can actually also have joint effort to counter the dictator and authoritarianism.
This is actually the first time we all met together, just 2 days ago, and I think we learned that we all like cheese curds. That's first. Yeah, we all really like Wisconsin, and this is my first time here actually, and it's a beautiful state. And I think we also all learned that we are humans who deeply care about the cause. There is so much in common between all of us. We had a wonderful conversation with each other. This is the way where we connect on a very deep level. And I think this is something where we all miss, conversations on a deep level. This is where my field, dialogue, comes in. Just being curious and asking the questions, trying to understand a person a little bit more and try to imagine how it feels to be in their shoes.
Thank you. I think I will ride on the last point that she has made. Being together makes me feel like there is still hope in the future for us to regroup, for us to reaffirm our collective power to respond contumaciously to what is happening across the authoritarian regimes that we come from. And it has also made me reflect on how oppression can never be measured. Oppression is still oppression. I come from Africa, they are coming from different continents. And when they share their stories, I feel the same pain because they share them from that pain that they have as people who have interacted with their particular experiences. And I believe that this experience of just being together, of understanding how people are still also on the front lines, regardless of what they are facing, is something that rekindles and also reawakens the fire that is inside me as a human rights defender to continuously and perpetually fight, to stand on in what I believe in. It can never be taken for granted to be in a room or to share space with people who are like-minded. And I think that's the greatest lesson that I've managed to take.
I think I also learned very much a lot from all of my colleagues here. It made me feel that you can actually be in a place that you can be understood without even having to speak. And I think it resonated pretty much a lot with all of us, and also gave me the hope that there's still a lot that we need to work on, but still there's a lot of hope that is being sent away. There's still a lot of fights that we need to face, but still we're still all gonna work on. And who knows, maybe one day we're gonna support each other in one way or another. And also the good thing that now we know, as my colleague mentioned, that dictators are working together, but we're also kind of here to show them that we are also working together and we're gonna win this fight against them.
I want to thank you for being here, for your courage, for modeling what it is like to resist authoritarian government. And my question has to do with, you all talked about violations of human rights and how that was, how it started in your countries. we know that it begins as a process, and part of the process is desensitizing us to violations of human rights. How do we resist desensitization to human rights violations? What can we do as individuals?
Thank you so much. I think you raise a critical question around how, when these stories are shared, somehow much lipstick is put to them and much face powder. But when we appear to tell them, you can feel the pain, the grief, the sorrow in them. And I think as individuals, I believe that there is more that can be done, particularly number one, to regroup and share the stories from your circles within. Number two, we come from different professions. Some of you are teachers, lecturers, some of you are musicians, some of you, anything that you might think of. There is a way in which the world can know about these stories. There is a way in which we can reshape the narrative as individuals. And I believe if that power is utilized well, then we are able to counter what we have just mentioned.
Well, I want to thank each of you for coming out this evening, and for those of you that joined the live stream for taking the time to hear from these incredible individuals. And I really want to thank Sunny, Hajar, Maria, and Takudzwa for leaving their families, leaving their homes, coming here to Wisconsin this week, not just to try cheese curds, but to share their incredible stories. So please join me in a round of applause for these incredible people. Thank you all so much. I really hope that you leave here feeling a little bit more hopeful and definitely inspired, and knowing that each of you has a role to play, no matter how big or how small. We've got a lot of decisions to make in the next 6 days, and I think if you have one takeaway, we cannot take that right to vote for granted, because it can be lost so darn quickly. So if you haven't voted already, no matter who you're planning to vote for, or if you don't know, do that research. Take the time to head to the polls. Take the time to fill out that mail-in ballot and exercise that right to vote, because you just heard from some people who would do anything to have that right. So I hope you know that your voice matters, your vote matters, and that you can be the change that you want to have around the world. And it is now my pleasure to welcome Doug Savage, who we've kept waiting quite a long time to provide some closing remarks. And as he walks up the stage, I want to thank Chia, Eric, Doug, Alex, and Ruth at the Thompson Center for all of the incredible work that you did in a short amount of time to make sure that this important event happened. And I want to thank my colleague, Pat O'Connor from the McCain Institute, who made this trip possible from a logistics perspective, and all of my colleagues at the McCain Institute who are supporting this event.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you to the McCain Institute, the Tommy G. Thompson Center, and the Wisconsin Institute for Citizenship and Civil Dialogue for giving this opportunity to us. And I'm sure I speak for the audience to say we're grateful for what we've heard today, and humbled by the work that you do. So, your stories remind us that democracy is fragile. And as we are in the last days of our exercise in democracy here, we should realize this is not something you can set and forget. It requires maintenance. And as one of the world's oldest democracies, Americans have a special responsibility, I would argue. Former President Jimmy Carter, who at age 100 just cast his early ballot, once said, "The best way to enhance freedom in other lands is to demonstrate here that our democratic system is worthy of emulation." Well, despite the challenges of our current environment, I hope we'll do just that. Political discourse has always been steeped in the language of conflict. Politicians wage campaigns. They compete in battlegrounds. They plan strategy in war rooms. But sadly, these warlike political metaphors are becoming reality in our country. Authorities tell us that drones, snipers, bulletproof glass, and armed security patrols will be the feature of many polling places around America this year. FBI Director Christopher Wray said the fact that election workers are worried about their security is incomprehensible and unacceptable. I think we'd all agree. But a survey by the pro-democracy initiative Project Homefire found this year in a survey 24% of Democrats and 31% of Republicans polled agreed with the following statement, quote, "Democracy is no longer a viable system and America should explore alternative forms of government." Sobering. So for these people, the need to stop the other side from destroying our country outweighs the needs to preserve democracy. But our American democracy has always been based on, frankly, the often difficult task of accepting the legitimacy of the opinions of our neighbors with whom we disagree. We must see elections as a competition between policies and ideas, not an existential battle between good and evil. We must work to get back to the place where we can disagree without being disagreeable. And importantly, we must trust our neighbors who tend the machinery of democracy, our electoral workers. Despite claims to the contrary, there's been little evidence to doubt their good work. So here and elsewhere, politicians may be tempted, as we've heard, to use the potent politics of division and fear for their own ends, but when they do, democracy pays a heavy price. So with less than a week before the election, let's remember, once again, democracy is on the ballot. Who we chose, who we send to the state legislature, to Congress, or even the White House, at some level is less important than democracy itself. So in closing, let's be guided by the warning that Benjamin Franklin offered at the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. He was asked, will America be a republic or a monarchy? And he responded, a republic, if you can keep it. So let's keep it. Thank you.